The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation building series, The Law and You. This is program number 879, coming to you on Monday the 9th of October 2017. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic political tribalism. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments, beginning as usual with expressions of condolences to the families of all those persons who have died recently and particularly in tragic circumstances. And let me particularly hail up the family of the late Miss Beryl Richards, that nation-building public servant who distinguished herself in so many areas of life in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. May she rest in peace. You will note that I have a bit of a portrait in front of me. That is the iconic portrait of Che Guevara, well known to those who know anything about the Cuban Revolution. Yesterday, the world celebrated, well, between yesterday and today, celebrated or commemorated the 50th anniversary of his death in Bolivia. She was practically number 2 to Fidel Castro in the Cuban Revolution. He was a doctor by profession, and he was one of the intellectual architects of the Cuban Revolution. Tried to export revolutionary ideas to then colonial Africa. Then he tried to export it to the some nations of Latin America, he being an Argentinian by birth. And eventually in 1967, he was captured in Bolivia and summarily executed. But if you go to Cuba, everywhere you look, you will see portraits of this kind of Che Guevara. Mementos wherever you go, because he is really regarded as one of the fathers of the Cuban Revolution, and I pay my respect to his memory. Indeed, one of my sons has named his first son in honor of Che Guevara. So one of my grandsons is called Che. The World Cup, moving on to a different topic. The World Cup qualifying matches have thrown up some surprises, and one of them is the likelihood that Argentina may not qualify for the World Cup. That would be a shame, because it means we will not see the master Messi on the world stage if Argentina does not qualify. Whether they qualify or not would largely depend on the outcome of their match tomorrow evening against Bolivia. And those of us who regard Messi as a genius would really like to see Argentina qualify. In fact, Holland is in doubt as well. Let us hope Holland also qualifies. But let me get on to the topic for the evening, excuse me, political tribalism. I had two recent experiences which bear on the topic for the evening. Last week when the House of Assembly met, there was a special agenda item before the House, and that was a tributes to the outgoing Attorney General, Mrs. Judy Jones Morgan. Invitations had gone out to members of the legal profession, and many of us from the bar were present as strangers in the Strangers Gallery of the House of Assembly, and we listened to tributes being offered, firstly by the Prime Minister, then by the Deputy Prime Minister, then by Minister Saboto Caesar, followed by Minister Camilo Gonsalves, followed by Minister Luke Brown. And when they were finished, the Speaker asked if there were any more contributions. I waited expectantly, looked at the members of the opposition to see who would first rise to pay their tribute. The opposition was all present except for the leader of the opposition, Dr. Godwin Friday. He was not there. But to me, all the other members of the opposition were present. And not one of them rose to speak on the topic. Not one. To me, it was a bit of a disgrace. They obviously had taken the policy position that nobody would have the manners, the graciousness to get up and say, well, we did not agree with the lady, but we thank her for her service. Or words to that effect, one sentence or two sentences, but nobody got up on the opposition side to say thank you to the lady for 16 and a half years of service as Attorney General. I was simply appalled, and I had to leave the house immediately. I couldn't take it. That was one of the two experiences I'm telling you about. The other experience which bears on the topic I had was last evening. I was looking at one of my favorite television channels, Al Jazeera, and at 8:30, a program came on highlighting an interview between Al Jazeera and the Dominican president, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt. The program lasted for half an hour. And by way of aside, you recall my advising you that you should look, if you really want to get information as to what's happening in the world, you should look occasionally at Al Jazeera, channel 282, for those who have cable. To me, it is the most informative English-speaking television service at present. And I sat in front of the television set last night. I took in all of that half an hour. The program was devoted exclusively to Dominica and the effect of Hurricane Maria on Dominica. And for about 25 minutes of the half an hour, there was an interview with Prime Minister Skerritt. That was an eye-opener. Not only did they show scenes of the total devastation which took place in Dominica, but it set me thinking that but for the grace of God, that could have been St. Vincent, because recently we had almost total devastation in Anguilla, in Barbuda, in St. Martin, and other islands in the Leeward Islands, and then of course devastation in Puerto Rico. Some damage in Cuba, and from 4 hurricanes in a row, damages along the southern coast of the United States of America. And one of the things Prime Minister Roosevelt said is that in 4 to 5 hours, all the gains Dominica had made in agriculture, in forestry, in ecotourism had been wiped out. And he made the point that Dominica was an island so that whenever there is a natural disaster, there's no other part of the country to which citizens could go to get away from the disaster, the way you can if you're in a large country. If you're in the United States of America, what happens in the southern states has nothing to do with what happens elsewhere in America. When you have a volcanic eruption in Italy, it doesn't affect the whole of Italy. You have things happening in the Far East. Things affect one part of the country, but those things do not necessarily affect another part of the country. The scenes, the Dominica Prime Minister came close to tears when he described what is happening on the television scenes in Dominica. The Prime Minister said there were some villages in which every single structure was damaged or destroyed. He made the joke that even the Prime Minister of Dominica was homeless for a while because the roof of the Prime Minister's residence came off. He said every school, every hospital was damaged. He said the shelters to which people had been taken were all damaged. And you're talking about what happened in 4 to 5 hours. A sovereign, independent country, the Commonwealth of Dominica, damaged, almost destroyed. And then as I looked at the program, I thought of us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We too are susceptible to natural disaster. We live in the presence of a volcano, thankfully sleeping since 1979, but a volcano which can awake at any time. We live in a zone prone to earthquakes. Thankfully, we've had nothing but light tremors from time to time. We are next door to a country with an undersea volcano, Kickhamjenny. And of course, we are prone to hurricanes. Prime Minister Skerritt, in the course of his interview, said, look, we will try to build back, but there's going to be another hurricane season next year. So my thoughts ran on the nature of sovereignty, the nature of political sovereignty in small, vulnerable states like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The problem facing Dominica would be that the attention of the world is focused on so many other places in the Caribbean that Dominica may not get the resources it needs to totally rebuild in a quick time. The United States government would be wholly occupied with the restoration of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and of course the southern states, which have been damaged by Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Maria, and 2 days ago, Hurricane Nate. So that Dominica really may not get the attention it so badly deserves. And let me remind us here in St. Vincent and Grenadines, Dominica is going to need help for a long time. Let us continue whatever we can do, even as we assist other damaged islands in the region. So what all of this has to do with political tribalism? Well, this is the point. Where we call home a country which, in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a country which consists of several islands, all very vulnerable to natural disasters, how do we approach the question of governance? What is there for us to beat our chest about, or to have enmity about in governance? These island nation states can best be managed by a political system that is based on cooperation rather than one based on competition. When we had the recent exercise leading to the referendum, it became obvious to those of us who are involved in the constitution-making exercise that the kind of government we have is not the best suited model for small, vulnerable, economic dependent entities that we call a nation state. Prime Minister Skerritt made a point during his interview that in rebuilding Dominica, because the interviewer asked him, well, you have a parliamentary opposition, what is going to be their role, if any? And he said, everybody has to get together. He said, a committee has been set up, including the opposition and all major stakeholders in the country, to plan and organize the restoration of Dominica. We simply have no room for the kind of political tribalism which we have known throughout our political history. Now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not the only place with tribal politics. Politics is tribal practically everywhere. But the fact that grown, educated men and women today in 2017 can understand that our vulnerability, our fragility calls for a different approach to governance is a sad fact. If that hurricane that struck Dominica and other places had struck us and had damaged us as much as it has done to Dominica, where is the glory, where is the benefit of our being so tribal in our approach? By tribalism, I mean that both sides of the political divide regard the other with enmity. I'm not telling you something you don't know. In politics, the members of one political party are taught not just to compete with the members of the other political party, because we really just have two parties here, never mind the pretensions of others. But we are taught to utterly reject the other side. We are taught to castigate the other side. We are taught to disrespect the other side. We are taught to hate the other side and to do whatever can be done to damage their credibility and their character. It is open warfare. That is what our politics have done over the years. And let us not pretend that it is otherwise. At election time, people try their best to utterly destroy the characters of other people, called candidates, so that hopefully a political advantage could be obtained. Now, clearly that is not what the Lord meant for us. That is not how He meant us to live. But we have allowed politics to so divide us that we refuse to even stand and say thank you to somebody who has given public service. That is one aspect of tribalism, one manifestation of the deleterious nature of tribalism, hatred, envy, jealousy, and utter disregard for the graciousness of brotherly love. Tribalism. Where on the radio day by day you can hear people denigrating other people, often with lies, slander, ridicule, untruth, innuendo. Why? Hopefully to gain a political advantage, so we think. Crime has become more rampant in this country than at any time, and the nature of the crime. Yet our political parties are at each other's throats. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of young people who are looking for employment or for opportunities for further studies. Granted, the authorities are doing whatever they can, but we are not suited to tackling national problems in a national manner because we do not have a national approach to governance. Our system puts us at one another's throats. And therefore, the sort of cooperative approach we should have to governance, to the harnessing of our resources, we don't have. In other words, what it is we are fighting over politically, we are fighting over a national entity which could be destroyed in a few hours. And in the case of an earthquake, in a few seconds. In the case of an eruption, in a few minutes. So what are we fighting about? And call ourselves Christian. That is not what the good book preaches. The good book preaches the opposite of political tribalism. We had one attempt at bringing in a different political system. That one was rejected. But we can't take that rejection and say, well, there's nothing we can do. We have to strive to do better. Because we find ourselves fighting over crumbs if we ever should face a national and natural disaster. So once again, I'm calling on the nation to reject political tribalism. I'm calling on the two political parties to rethink tribalism and to try once again to get a political system that the parties work together, and we shouldn't wait until we have a disaster in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to come together. We have to come together now. We can't wait until it is too late. I will return to this theme if life spares. For now, that is all from this program of The Law and You. I look forward to being of further service to you next week, Monday DB, for another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant and thoughtful week and a prayerful week, my brothers and sisters. And may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.